Okay, everyone, today we're going to do our lecture on the Roman Empire. The actual PowerPoint is a couple of lectures long, so I'll tell you when we're starting and stopping. And I think I'm going to try for this first one, doing it like Dora the Explorer, if any of you remember that show. So I'll ask a question and I'll do the 1, 2, 3 so you can answer at home. And then I will tell you you're right. Okay, so the Roman Empire. We're going to start with the geography of Rome. We know that it is in the center of the Mediterranean, which is great for trade. They're able to reach most areas around Europe and Western Asia. And it is located on a peninsula, okay, which means you have 3 sides surrounded by water. And we see that it has broad, fertile plains for farming. What does fertile mean? That's right, easy to grow crops. So they're very much able to grow more than they need for their people. And as we remember, more food means more people. So it's easy to expand their empire. And there's very few barriers between the lands in Italy, so that's very unlike Greece. Remember, Greece, very rocky mountains, lots of islands, so they're able to develop very different cultures, as we saw with Sparta and Athens. In Italy, you see much closer tribal relations. Okay, so moving on to the next one. So let's talk about the Roman Republic. Basically, you have the tribes of Italy joining together to live together for safety purposes. The more people are joined, the better they're able to defend themselves. So after they join together, they decide, let's organize our government. And that's really what Rome becomes famous for, because the government they organize is the Roman Republic, which a lot of governments today, including our own, are based on. So 509 BCE, before Common Era, is considered the founding of the Roman state. Remember, the Roman Empire will be about 1,000 years, from 500 BCE to 500 CE, with some ups and downs. But we count 509 as really the founding of the Roman state. They use the term republic because it means belonging to the people. It has the word public right in it, so that should be easy to remember. So when they organize it, they come up with a bunch of different rules, very similar to our Constitution. A lot of rules about who should be in charge, what powers they should have, and who has access to the government. So to start with, we need to talk about what they wanted to have for their government. Okay, and they came up with one major goal, which was they really wanted to prevent one person from gaining too much power. Now, if you know the history of Rome, you know that's not going to work out that well. But when they started, they wanted to make sure there wasn't one person in charge who was going to ruin everything. The major development they had for that was creating the Senate. Okay, and the Senate was filled with individuals from the patrician class. So what is a patrician? Very good. A wealthy land-owning citizen male who would have the most power. And members of the patrician class would meet in the Senate to decide laws and make basically all the rules. Now, they did have leaders at this time. They were called consuls. There were 2 of them. Each of the consuls had their own job. Okay, so one was in charge of government business. So think like running the economy and social programs like education and healthcare and all that stuff. And the other's job was military. So that involves obviously the defense of the Roman Republic, but it can also later mean the expansion of the Roman Republic through conquering other lands. Each consul only served 1 term, so term limits, very important to the Roman Republic, so another way to prevent one person from taking over forever. And also, they had to approve each other's decisions, which today we call checks and balances. So you couldn't decide to randomly raise the taxes without approval from the other consul, and you couldn't decide to go to war without approval from the other consul. They had to work together, and that was a preventative measure, again, to keep one person from taking over and running the whole empire. The consuls ruled during times of peace, and they recognized that you need different requirements and different powers for running the government when you are at war, which Rome did a lot. So the second position they create is a dictator. A dictator has only power during a time of war. So once war starts, you get a dictator. When the war ends, the dictator has to step down. They are only allowed 6 months terms, meaning if you are chosen as the dictator, you have 6 months to win the war. If you don't win, you're replaced, which if you look moving on to the future for Rome, as well as many other countries, this is actually a fairly big incentive because you can have wars that can go on for years and years and years with the same leaders. The most famous military dictator is Cincinnatus. Okay. Can anyone think of where we've heard the name Cincinnatus before? Good job. You have many cities named after him, Cincinnati. And maybe some of you already know that Cincinnatus was referenced by George Washington when he was making his argument as to why he was choosing to only serve 2 terms. It's because Cincinnatus is a very famous Roman general who won many battles, many wars, and then he retired. He moved out of the Roman city to a farm where he just grew his crops and raised his chickens. And then Rome had to go to war, and they asked him to come and be the dictator, and that is what he did. He stepped up, he organized a military, he went to fight the war, and he won it in 6 weeks. And at the end of 6 weeks, the Roman Senate was so impressed, they actually wanted to break their own rules and said, would you like to continue ruling Rome? And Cincinnatus said, no, my job as dictator was to win the war. I did my job. I'm going back home to feed my chickens. And that's exactly what he did. He went back to his farm. And he becomes the model for a great dictator. Besides your Senate, which is your wealthy ruling class, and your consuls, and sometimes a dictator, which are your upper-level rulers, you do have the commoners, everyone else, and they will fall into the category of tribunes. So tribunes were a part of the government that didn't have a lot of power. They were made up by the plebeian class. And what are plebeians? Very good. The lower class citizens, the poor, the commoners, everyone else. They didn't have a lot of powers. They couldn't make the laws. They couldn't write the laws. However, the one power they had was very important. They could veto the laws. So you couldn't have the wealthy class citizens make a law that said they would tax all the common people an extra 50%. They would veto that law and it couldn't be passed. It's an important point because you're showing that the Republic really was for all the people. Even if the power wasn't possessed equally, they did have power at all the classes. Okay. Most of this stuff happened in the Roman Forum, so you're on the next slide. The Roman Forum, you can actually go and visit online. It's a very pretty place, and a lot of the structures still stand today. It was the Center Marketplace. Does anyone remember what the Center Marketplace was called in ancient Greece? The Agora. Good job. It's the same thing. This is where everyone would go to do all of their stuff. You go there for your daily shopping, you go there for passing laws, and you go there for prayer for several different temples. The most important point of the Roman Forum was that all around the Forum you had posted the tablets of Roman law. So they were 12 very large tablets that had the laws chiseled into the actual tablets so that everyone could see the laws. What's the important part of that? Why is it important to have written laws that everyone can see? Yes, if everyone knows the laws, the government can't make up new laws. They can't randomly create ones, which means people have faith in their government. They trust their government because they know that they're being held accountable to what is written in the forum. Next slide, moving on. Some other quick facts just to know about ancient Roman Republic. When it comes to the rights of women, you did see more advanced rights. Many of them could own land. The reality is there were more rights with class. The higher level you were, the more likely you were able to hold rights, including up to a point where very wealthy women could divorce their husbands if they wanted to. And they could also own businesses. You do see many female merchants at that time, which is, again, another empowering factor for women. When it comes to education, all Roman citizens knew how to read and write. Boys and girls all learned how to read and write. If they were from wealthy families, their education will continue, usually with Greek tutors. Okay, why is it important for everyone to learn how to read and write? Yes, lots of good answers. All of you are paying attention, haven't fallen asleep yet. Really the very big point is that you're going to see more people are invested in their government in the republic because they understand what's going on. It's not just trusting with blind faith. They're able to read and write, and they're able to interact in that way. Again, if you're wealthy, you can have more education. It'll be different for boys and girls, but you do have that more advanced learning. And a lot of those tutors were from Greece. Does anyone remember the very famous Greek tutor? Yes, Aristotle. Okay, famous for founding the first university. Another quick fact that a lot of kids like to learn about, and have already learned about, I think like 6th grade is when you start learning about it, is obviously Roman religion. Very popular and very, very detailed because they took it all from ancient Greece. They adopted the Greek religion, and they will just change the names of most of the people. Later on, they'll add their own gods, but to start with, they all get their own versions, with the planets being the ones that we notice the most because they name the original 8 planets they're able to see. No, that's not right. 6 planets they're able to see. And then we'll continue the trend as we move on. Okay. So how do we shift from a republic to an empire? So the republic is going to grow. A huge part of that is based on their military. They're going to develop their own military style that will include legions. So legions were military units of 5,000 men. Very famous fighting style you can see from the images that you are used to seeing as the Roman soldier. For what's important to know is all of those soldiers were considered citizens. They were citizen soldiers, meaning they weren't getting salaries originally for being soldiers. Instead, they got paid with the spoils of war. And can anyone tell me what the spoils of war was? Yeah, so that is when you basically get paid by taking stuff from conquered land. You have to win in order to steal gold and jewelry and people. The only way you can do that is if you win. So it's a very big motivating factor using the spoils of war. Later on, they'll shift to actually paying their soldiers, and soldiering will become an actual profession. But when it first starts, you have citizen soldiers. When they conquered people, they were treated justly. We're going to use the little quotation marks for that, because it's justly in comparison to other areas, in the sense of when they conquered, all you had to do was accept Rome, say, yes, we are part of the Roman Empire. You have to pay taxes, and you have to provide soldiers, very similar to Alexander the Great's empire. In terms of how your life changes, that's it. You get to keep your customs, you get to keep your money, you get to keep your local government. Rome wasn't interested in the beginning at making everyone Roman. And most importantly, they are going to connect everyone in their empire through roads. And to the point where you get this very famous saying, all roads lead to Rome, because their entire empire was connected through roads. Roads are very, very important for 3 reasons. Can anyone guess? Yes, number 1 would be military. Having to, being able to move your military where they needed to go. The second would be goods, being able to ship what you need to all places. And the third would be communications, being able to send information. The fastest way you can send it is through well-traveled roads. Okay, so communication, goods, military, all needing to travel quickly. Okay. The last thing we're going to talk about today is the Punic Wars, which I know you reviewed with Mr. Formosi, so we'll go over them quickly. So the Punic Wars is Rome versus Carthage. Carthage is a country in northern Africa, right across the way from Rome. The Punic Wars are a series of 3 wars that last from 264 BCE to 146 BCE. And you'll see Rome basically being the victor. The first one starts with Rome wanting the islands of Sicily, Corsica, and Sardinia, which many people today associate with Italy, even though the Sicilians would greatly disagree with that. But for the most part, you identify them as being Italian today. Rome will win those islands. From Carthage. The Carthaginians will not be happy about that. So you'll see the Second Punic War with a very famous Carthaginian leader, Hannibal. And he will do his very famous march through the Alps because basically Rome protected all of its seaports because no one is crazy enough to actually come through the north and up through the mountains. Until they met Hannibal, who was crazy enough. And he's not going to do it alone. He's going to go with a large force of soldiers, as well as about 400 elephants, which were a great novelty in Italy at that time. Rome. And you see him marching through. Most of the elephants, unfortunately, are going to die. He's going to invade Rome with about 10 elephants left, but if you've ever seen a real elephant, you really only just need one to scare the people. And you see him very rapidly approaching on the center of Rome, and it really looks like Rome is going to fall. Except the Roman generals decide to do something different. Instead of standing to fight against Hannibal, they are going to get on their ships and they're going to sail to Carthage, which at that point was not protected because all the soldiers had shipped off with Hannibal up through the Alps. And they sent an ultimatum. You can either take Rome and lose all of Carthage, or you can abandon your fight against Rome and come back and save your people. And that's what Hannibal chose to do. He chose to go back and protect Carthage. In the Third Punic Wars, where Rome really gets their reputation for being terrible, because they go in and they destroy Carthage. And by destroy, we mean kill all the men, sell all the women and children into slavery. They're going to burn all the buildings, and then they're going to import a lot of salt, which they will then ground into all of the soil. It's called salting the earth. What happens when you put a lot of salt in the ground? Yes, it ruins the ground. It raises the acidity in the soil, so the crops can't grow anymore for many years, if not decades. So they guaranteed that even if you did survive the slaughter and you were able to escape slavery and you were able to find your way back to Carthage, you wouldn't be able to live there anymore because you wouldn't be able to grow any crops. And it kind of let people know the real power of Rome, because it was, we rule you justly, in the sense of you can do whatever you want, but if you anger us, we will destroy you to the point of you will never, ever be able to rise again. And that really becomes the theme of the Roman Empire, which we will discuss in our next lecture on Monday. So remember, you're going to go and do your guided reading now. It's going to review most of what I just told you. You'll be able to fill out the Google Doc to help you remember the different points of the Roman Republic as it shifts into an empire. And then again, very importantly, I need you to do that exit slip where you're just going to answer one question in a short answer format. I just need a sentence or two where you're explaining your answer. Okay. If you have any questions while you're working, feel free to email. And I will see you on Monday. Okay.